Hey, mother truckers, it's the Headbangers Book Club podcast. This is Zach.
Hey, Kelly.
And we are talking about part 2 of Sebastian Bach's 18 of Life on Skid Row. Second and last part. This book really picked up. We've got a lot to talk about today. So I'm not going to waste a lot of time going into it. If you're listening to this, you probably know what we're doing. If you don't know what we're doing, then you can go back and listen to the first episode of Sebastian Bach, or you can go all the way back to Led Zeppelin, and we'll explain what we're doing and why we're here. But for now, we're just going to jump right into it. First, though, I'm going to quickly read out some comments because, as usual, you guys responded to us, so it's always good to hear from you. So I've got a couple from the Led Zeppelin show still that we've had some of our listeners trickling in there. Our friend Humongous, aka Otto Maton, he goes by many names. He said, not that big a fan of the Zeps, but I do like a few of the harder rocking songs. I'm looking forward to this new format, though. So far, it's fun. He also checked me on my preference for... I said that John Bonham was probably my favorite drummer. And he said, Bonzo over Moon the Loon. That's blasphemy, which, that's fair. I think the real reason why... So I was a big Keith Moon disciple. And I think that actually sort of set back my drumming progress because I was just like constantly playing all over the kit. When I would play in a more controlled environment, they would be like, Zach, you don't need to always be doing a fill. I took the wrong lessons from Keith Moon. So anyway, Humongous also commented a few times. He let us know the nicknames for the Hulk, which I totally blanked on. I did add to the show notes that he was known as the Green Goliath. He also added Jade Jaws and Greenskin. So that's all of the names for the Hulk. I think I'm gonna go ahead and give that one. That'll be my comment of the episode. My favorite comment of the episode. So Humongous, you know where to find us if you want that amazing Headbangers Book Club official selection sticker. Just let us know. Give us your email address, and we will, or somehow privately. You also follow us on Twitter because he did mention he follows on both his personal account and his account for his webcomic. Thank you for that. I did notice that. Those of you out there, if you want to check out Humongous's webcomic, it's on Twitter. It's at MurderYouComics. So if one of our 6 listeners wants to find out what another one of our 6 listeners is doing, I'm happy to connect you guys. So there you go. So anyway, you can just DM me on Twitter or reach me in any of the myriad ways to reach us, and I will get you a sticker. We've got a couple more comments here. Marty White, another one. This is in the running for my favorite comment of the month. So it's anybody's game next time. But Marty White said about the Sebastian Bach episode 1. I just put this on, so you may mention it, but Sebastian Bach's guest spots on Trailer Park Boys, a beautiful trashy Canadian TV show, are tops. We actually didn't mention it because I knew he was going to talk about it in the second half of the book. But I will say he didn't talk about it all that much. Yeah. He just sort of like talks about how much he loved the show. And he talked about...
how much Axl Rose liked it too.
Yeah, he talked about Axl Rose was also a fan. And he said that I think it was Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys went on tour with Motley Crue or something.
Oh, yeah. Like in character.
Yeah, because he said he was in the glasses. So yeah, there wasn't really all that much to it. I don't think Sebastian even really talked about what he did on the show. I vaguely remember it. Have you watched that, Callie?
I've watched Trailer Park Boys. I haven't watched enough that I would remember Sebastian Bach though.
It's a later season. Yeah. But he was in a storyline if I recall correctly, they were they're always doing these stupid schemes, and they were trying to smuggle drugs over the US Canadian border. And Sebastian Bach was involved because he was like using a model train in the drug smuggling process. And that's all I remember. I thought about rewatching it, but I've been too busy. But yes, Sebastian Bach is great as always in Trailer Park Boys. It's been a while since I've seen it, but if I remember correctly, he is thoroughly blazed in every scene that he's in, which, makes sense. So there you go. Yep, we did mention it, but not as much as you would expect, and neither did Sebastian Bach. So got one more comment here. This is actually from Instagram. It's always cool to see somebody interacting with one of our other platforms, especially because I still don't really know how to use Instagram. So, but anyway, Steve Clark said on Instagram, very cool to the Photoshop I did, inserting myself into the picture of Callie and Sebastian Bach. I'll have to check it. I have the hardback with the poster cover, which was a cover photo of Sebastian on Rolling Stone magazine in 1991. I did not actually know that. Also, I have an audiobook, which Bach reads the book. So that was captivating to hear it narrated in his voice. Great package. And that's our last comment. And it is also an excellent transition into our own experience reading this book. Because
I got the audiobook.
Yeah, and I did too. Like we both jumped ship to the audiobook after, and I have to say, like we were like, oh, maybe not, maybe that's too much.
You know what changed it for me?
Oh, what? I think I know, but tell us.
The David Lee Roth chapter. 100%. I was like, okay. This convinces me. I need to hear this.
Yeah.
And I was not disappointed.
Yeah, I still actually need to go back because I didn't jump on until later. And I read a lot faster. And so like I read probably the last third of this book in one sitting on Sunday night. Just because I knew I needed to get it done. So like, I haven't actually heard enough of the audiobook as I could, but it's exciting because it's like, I have something to look forward to now. And I will say that what I heard of it, I didn't hear him do David Lee Roth, but I heard him do a lot of other, I love his Axl Rose. I love when he does dialogues between himself and Axl Rose, because he does this like deep, gruff voice for Axl Rose, and then he like plays up his like higher pitched eager puppy voice, and their exchanges, they would just make I want to see a buddy cop movie with Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose is what I'm getting at. So he does a good Axl Rose.
Does Lars Ulrich.
Oh my god, his Lars Ulrich is worth the price of admission alone, because it starts out like just a Danish, I mean, like not even Danish. That's actually giving it too much credit. It starts out just like a generic foreign accent. And then the more Sebastian gets into it, and, also the drunker Lars gets, it becomes Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then it becomes Conan O'Brien doing Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like it just gets more and more deranged. And also just his descriptions of Lars Ulrich are amazing. There's also, as Callie pointed out, there's also some more questionable choices. Like, what's the Japanese guy again? The Masahito?
He also does Masahito, who is Japanese. So, like,
yeah, but you ask Sebastian Bach to do voices, he's gonna do all the voices. Like, he's not gonna pick and choose based on your political correctness. He's just, you asked for it. He's going to give it to you. So, but yes.
To be fair, I think, this doesn't excuse it at all, but he's not just doing a generic Japanese voice. This is someone he knows.
Right,
and is
it's a
friends
specific
with.
guy.
So that makes it a little bit better, but it's still like, in general, just maybe don't do Asian accents.
Yeah, but yeah, it's all, it's very good natured. And that's something that I think the audiobook really helps get the book across, because like we said last time, this is not a traditional book in so much as it is a simulation of Sebastian Bach cornering you and telling you his entire life story. And so when you're listening to that, it's even more so. And like, you know, he kind of like makes himself laugh, and he, you know, again, he gets into the voices and stuff. It's a lot, but it's also fun. It was the weather here is terrible again, but for like a week, we had like some beautiful spring days. So I would take a walk and listen to Sebastian Bach yelling about doing cocaine with Lars Ulrich. And that was, those were my workouts. So that was, it worked well.
He does a lot of like radio zoo effects. Like, especially when he's doing like the like when he does the bonus, it'll be like bonus and then, and then he does like he reads the Hulk's poem that he wrote as a child or something like that, or he apologizes to the fan that he smacked in the face with a bottle, or
right. And I think it's important to let people who haven't heard the audiobook know that by doing the Radio Zoo effects, we mean imitating them with his mouth. He doesn't actually have a soundboard.
I think he does have an echo effect, but most of them are. It very much feels like a one-man production, which is, you know, part of the charm. I also want to say, before we really like jump into this, I want to say I didn't really mention last time. We talked about the different chapters, but I never said anything about the chapter titles, which are great. And I actually think that they get better in the second chapter. So I just want to like run through and read some of these chapter titles out. So chapter 7, which is where we left off last time, was Feel Good and then Feel Better. It's a Dr. Feel Good pun for those of you who didn't catch that. Line up on your crew puns.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that one's fine. Chapter 8 is Bach This Way, because that's when he's on tour with Aerosmith. So that's also, it's not even the only Sebastian Bach and Aerosmith chapter pun. The second one is better. In fact, I was going to say, I forgot. I was going to say, hey, mother truckers, we're Bach in the saddle with part two of Sebastian Bach.
We'll just edit that in. These another thing about the audiobook is it makes these titles even better, because if you hear them in Sebastian Bach's voice.
Right, yeah.
Because it'll be like, Chapter 9, bunch of booze, mountain to blow, Quaaludes, and tennis. My time with Metallica.
Yeah. And that's probably the best chapter. I also like the chapter title, Everybody is Mad at Me All of the Time.
I like that chapter because it was just like him explaining that he's busy and that people get pissed off at him about it. I'm like, okay, dude.
I was actually, yeah, I assumed when I saw that chapter title, I assumed that would be like about all of the controversies when he was in Skid Row. Like, I thought it would be, I guess he already talked about the bottling, but, he punches several people out in the course of this book. There's also, the infamous AIDS kills fags shirt, which he actually doesn't mention in this book.
Yeah, he does not mention at all. But I feel like he did apologize for it.
He has apologized.
That's not necessarily accountability, but he does he does feel bad about it.
Yeah,
but he does not mention it at all in this.
Right. I was like, oh, that must be where he talks about the shirt, but he actually doesn't. But I mean, whatever.
Nope, it's literally just him giving you his schedule.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Yeah. But people are mad at him for all kinds of reasons. So, and I think those are the main ones. Bach in the Saddle is, you can't not have a chapter called Bach in the Saddle. Yeah. So good job on the titles. I enjoyed those.
There are also like smaller chapter titles.
Oh,
so there'll
yeah,
be like,
right.
There's that's what's confusing is it'll be 7, chapter 7, Feel Good, then Feel Better. And then there's like sub parts to this chapter. So it'll be like, no milk and cookie jokes. Even if rock circles considered crude and disgusting, weird dreams. So it's like,
he named everything. Like you can really like pinpoint where you want to start reading in this book.
Yeah, which is handy. And just for a preview, I started the Meatloaf book last night because we're working on only one copy between us, so I'm trying to finish it early so I can send it to Callie. And the Meatloaf book is similar. It's like a bunch of little bite-sized chapters, all of which have names. When
was that published?
A little tiresome. 1999, so probably not. It's not going to be
I was really hoping that he talked about when he was on Celebrity Apprentice.
Yeah.
Sebastian Bach definitely talks about each and every single reality TV show he was on in this.
He talks about like, oh my God, this is like not actually funny, because his father is for a lot of this part of the book, or like especially the very end of the book, his father, who we remember, he was a major part of the first half, is dying of is leukemia, right? So it's a really rough experience for him, and you can really tell that it's really, really difficult for him. But that being said, this part did make me laugh because he's doing this reality show for VH1 called Forever Wild, which, do you remember? I don't remember this. Do you? But
no,
you might have
I don't remember even reading about this.
Oh, okay.
Is this the Ted Nugent show?
No, it's another. It's from around the same time.
Oh, I don't even remember this.
I remember.
Just didn't retain that part.
Like we said,
all
Sebastian
I remembered
Bach,
is Celebrity Fit Club.
Right. Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
And Supergroup.
Yeah, Sebastian Bach was basically the president of VH1 in the early to mid 2000s. So apparently he had his own television show on VH1.
I know what. Yeah, I just didn't remember the name of it. Or he was like the host, right?
Yeah, he was the host. He said they filmed 10 or 11 episodes. We shot a bunch of skits, some better than others. So that's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. He says each week we would have a special guest and shoot some crazy segments with them. Our guests included Rob Halford / Vince Neil, Ted Nugent. We had an episode near the end of the series scheduled with Gene Simmons in Las Vegas. During this particular episode, I was scheduled to jump out of a flying plane and parachute down to the earth below while announcing the next Nickelback video coming up after the commercial break. They told me the news for this while I was in Peterborough, Ontario, his hometown, spending time at Dad's house watching him die of leukemia and bone marrow cancer. So again, not a funny situation, but the juxtaposition of your beloved father dying and then VH1 calling and saying, hey, we want you to jump out of a plane to announce the new Nickelback video.
Well, and I think, he recognized that and like played it up.
Right,
I think like that's what makes it funny too, is that he recognized the irony in that,
right?
How
Which
stupid it is.
And also like this is something I appreciate. So I mean, there's a couple of different, like the second half of this book, there's a couple of different strains going on. So like the first half, it's like childhood and then early career, and it's it's the through line is that it's this like talented kid from a broken home with poor impulse control who wants to be a rock star and, succeeds. And when we left him off, he was, on kind of like had their first hit album. He was on top of the world. This one is basically split into two parts. There's the continuation of the Fame piece, because, he's on tour with Aerosmith and then he's on tour with Metallica and just, raising hell all over the place and getting into all kinds of shenanigans, your classic Headbangers book club material. And then it's after Skid Row breaks up, a lot of the rest of the book becomes, I think this is one of the most interesting parts of the book for me, because you see all of the like, honestly, sometimes kind of humiliating things that like somebody who used to be in a hit band but is now just like making ends meet has to do. Like he has to do these dumb tours that are like, you know, Monsters of Aquanet or whatever, like these dumb like hairband nostalgia tours, which, you know, and he says that he just like feels like throwing up whenever he sees a name like that, but it's like, this is how you pay the bills. He's playing like corporate
Sebastian Bach
gigs.
is very vocal about being anti-hair metal, like the title hair metal.
Right. Yeah, you know, he has to go on these shitty like morning zoo radio shows and like listen to them make jokes about hair, and he's trying to promote his new album that he actually cares about, and all anybody wants to talk about is Skid Row. I mean, it's, you know, it's familiar territory, but it's I don't know. I think it's interesting to have that kind of glimpse at like what that part of the trajectory is like, and it kind of ties into something I was saying last time, which is that, you know, this is also a job. And it was that early on when we saw him like audition for different bands, and we saw him, you know, making certain realizations about like, oh, if I damage the art in the hotel room, then that means my check for this tour is going to get smaller. But it becomes the whole business, or the whole job side of it becomes even more pronounced later when, you know, Skid Row is not on top of the world. And I think it makes him relatable, because who hasn't had to eat shit in a job, you know? Like, it's like,
well, it's not only just that, you know, Skid Row is probably going to be on their way out anyway, but he also got kicked out of the band, and so he's now solo. And it's funny that we were talking about like we don't care about any other members of Skid Row, and it's because Sebastian Bach is Skid Row. No one is anyone checking for Skid Row right now, like
exactly. I know it is funny that he got kicked out. It's band politics are just funny sometimes. It's like, what did you guys think was going to happen?
Right.
and in fact, he gets kicked out, and then like he assumed that he needs to go find a new agent, and then his agent were like, no, I stopped working with Skid Row. Like, I'm keeping you on as a client. It's like probably a good decision.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting that, because like, obviously like the band and his career were not as successful, but it's also just kind of a testament to like how the music industry was changing at this time. And a lot of this book is like nostalgia. Like as he's writing, he's talking about like basically like back in my day kind of stuff, like in the 70s and 80s, like people partied, blah, 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 which like, I think that there's some generational stuff going on, because people now still take drugs.
Still do drugs, yeah.
And not like he mentioned something like back in the 70s, dentists did cocaine. I'm like, I'm sure there are dentists who still do cocaine. Like, and you know, like regular office people and like tech bros and stuff, like people are still partying. Sebastian, I don't know where you got that information from. But then like not only that, but like a lot of it is, and we kind of spoke to this a little bit in the last episode, but he kind of grew up like at the tail end of rock music, kind of like when he was experiencing Kiss when they were starting to like in their own mind like get worse and like more commercial, and like Aerosmith he saw at the end of their kind of like heroin period, and then they obviously like he was active, you know, he toured with Aerosmith, he toured with Motley Crue when they were kind of like getting clean, so they weren't like it like from the accounts that I read, it seemed like it wasn't even as fun to tour with them as it would have been if they were not trying to get clean.
Well, they get all butthurt if you make a joke about milk and cookies.
Yeah, or like you can't smoke weed with Joe Perry.
Oh yeah,
which he mentioned specifically that he wanted to do.
Was it Bradley Whitford was like, hey, or Tom Hamilton? It was one of the lesser Aerosmiths. That's all I remember. And he was like, hey man, you can't do that, or else I'll have to leave my own hotel room.
I also love when he asked, I think it's the same, like I don't know, whichever of the two members of Aerosmith is not Steven Tyler or Joe Perry, who fucking cares? But like I like when he's like, hey man, can you give me some tips for the show? And the two tips he gets are like, you swear too much and you spit too much on stage. It's like, wow, thanks for the great performance tips. But yeah, I guess what I was saying is like he kind of like coming up, rock music was like at its pinnacle in the 70s. Right. Like he kind of, his dad was into rock music too and saw like rock music through the 60s and 70s, and then when he was like of age to see them, they were kind of all getting commercial or like drugged out. And then when he's in the 80s, you know, like there were the glam bands from LA, but even that was like getting really corporate and weird, and then it's like he's kicked out of Skid Row, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what do I do now? It's all reality TV, and that's kind of like the trajectory that rock music went. Yeah, there is an interesting like Twilight of the Gods kind of feel to this book, because it is like, Skid Row was of the last generation of those kinds of bands. And we saw a little bit of that with Motley Crue. Like, you know, every glam metal band, there's always a chapter where they're like, and then grunge happened, you know. So we saw some of that Crue
in
even
the
predated
dirt.
Skid Row. Like, I mean, and not to say that like Sebastian Bach wasn't in the scene before Skid Row, like he was aware of that stuff. But in terms of being like a successful band, Motley Crue predates Sebastian Bach's career. Like to the point where he had the album and was like, I want my first album to be produced by whoever and managed by Doc McGee. And like, so he was aware of this stuff before that. So it's just interesting to see like rock music like change through the eyes of Sebastian Bach, because I feel like there's some nostalgia within it for like when he was a teenager. But even when he was a teenager, like Aerosmith was not at their greatest when he went to see them. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, and not only does his trajectory start earlier, but it also goes further, because like it's not just the grunge replacing glam metal thing, although that is part of it. It's also just like, and he talks about this too, that when Skid Row was big, the music industry was in this crazy boom. You know, that was right when SoundScan came out, and these bands were just doing these like unbelievable numbers. Like Skid Row was like a #1 huge selling band, which is so bonkers to think about, because no offense to Sebastian Bach or Skid Row, but I think most people would consider them a minor band of the late 80s or early 90s, but they were huge. They were like a huge seller. And you know, and then he talks about like when he put out his solo album, he was really proud of it, and he was like, surely this will go #1 because this is better than, you know, Slave to the Grind or whatever. And then he quickly learned that the music industry in 2007 is not the music industry in 1991.
Was that Angel Down?
Yeah, it's Angel Down, yeah.
Having listened to Angel Down, I think there are some other reasons why it did not go platinum.
It's definitely loud.
I know. Like my new routine every morning. This is really sad. Let me tell you about my whole like life over the past like 4 weeks or whatever. So I have like extreme anxiety right now, to the point where I need something to sleep. Like I need to have something on to sleep. And so I've been listening to like podcasts. So for a while I was listening to comedy podcasts, and then like I found this like true crime and horror podcast that I've been listening to, but that doesn't do well with my anxiety. It just makes me like way more scared. So now I'm like scared all the time. So I listened to all my comedy podcasts, and then the audiobook to this came. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'll just listen to this when I go to sleep. So basically I just go to sleep listening to Sebastian Bach yell. And then I wake up and I'll be like, I want to listen to Back in the Saddle. And I'll put on Back in the Saddle from Angel Down with Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose. And we played a little bit of it in the last episode.
Yeah.
It's just noise.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it's just constant. Like, you start the song, and there's like, you know, the beat from Back in the Saddle, but then there's also Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose just like making these noises, like the whole lead up to the song, they're just like, ooh. And it's just like the noise does not stop. It's just like when waves peak, like the wave format peaks. That's the whole song. So I just put that on every morning.
That'll wake you up.
It reminds me of Back in the Saddle specifically, and he talks about this album and how he wanted Axl Rose to be on it because Axl Rose had just like come out of
right. This was when Chinese Democracy finally came out, right?
Yeah, so he had
right
just come out
time.
of like the woods or whatever,
yeah.
And so he did 3 songs on Sebastian Bach's album, and Sebastian Bach was so like surprised to have him on this album. And didn't like the record company want like one that did not have Axl Rose on it and one that did or something like that, and he was like, no, this is my album, so I'm gonna have but the Back in the Saddle specifically reminds me of those TikTok videos where it has 2 people and they have the headphones on and they're singing together.
Yeah,
it has like that quality of like they're just kind of singing over each other, and it's interesting. And it's funny that it's Sebastian Bach and Axl Rose, so they have like kind of that similar like era of singer.
right. And there's a lot
I wish
of
Vince
just
Neil
like
was
yowling.
on it too.
Yeah.
So, and Vince Neil wouldn't even have to be on the whole song because he'd probably just sing a couple lines.
I don't think Vince Neil could be on the whole song because he'd run out of breath and
he'd be like, all right, my voice is shot.
There's some good Vince Neil stories in this too. Later, and it's like latter day Vince Neil. So we're talking like
pretty much
now Vince Neil. And it reminded me of. Do you remember a couple years ago when there was that? When there was that video of Vince Neil and Nicolas Cage getting in a screaming...
Oh, my God!
They got in a screaming match in the streets of Las Vegas, and then they were like hugging each other and loudly apologizing to each other.
I completely forgot about that. I can't believe we didn't even bring that up when we talked about The Dirt.
Yeah,
it's like, honestly, what it is my head is so full of Vince Neil anecdotes that it's like there was no room for that. Because even like recently, we're recording this right after the Oscars, and my first thought with that was like, oh, this is like when Vince Neil punched Izzy Stradlin at the MTV Music
I know.
Awards. I'm like, literally anything that happens, I'm like, I can pull a Vince Neil-ism out of it.
It's like it's like it was a meme for a while that like there's always like an old Donald Trump tweet that predicts what he's doing now. It's like there's always a Vince Neil story that is prophetic to the current moment.
I just wish people memed Vince Neil more. Somewhere there's an alternate universe where I am like hilarious and like a meme influencer on Instagram, and I just stay posting like Vince Neil memes.
I won't get into this too much because everybody. I'm sure we're all tired of people talking about the Oscars, but there's all those like think pieces about like the death of civility and stuff, and it's like, man, you're not you clearly don't remember when Vince Neil cold cocked Izzy Stradlin for karate kicking his pregnant girlfriend like that.
Civility ended in 1986 or
1991 or whatever it was. Yeah.
And then nobody apologized for that.
Right.
It wasn't no apology. You know what happened after that? Vince Neil and Axl Rose kept setting up dates to fight, and Axl didn't show up. That is way better entertainment.
Yeah,
We've been here, and it's been better.
Yeah, exactly. That's my take on this whole thing.
I just so wish Chris Rock had gotten on, I don't even know what is the news equivalent of MTV News now? I don't even, and just told
Will Smith to meet him
a time and a date to meet him and then not shown up. That would have been great.
All right, but let's go back. Let's talk about Aerosmith. let's talk about all this other stuff. One thing I underlined or I highlighted here is that, and my notes are not extensive because, again, I was going back and forth from the audiobook and the Kindle version. So, you know, this will not be an I mean, first of all, there's no way that this can be an exhaustive discussion because it would be a 5-hour long podcast. There is so many fucking stories in this. And then sometimes he'll just, like, again, like last time where he was like, should I talk about the time that they locked me up or whatever, you know, and we never got an answer to it. There's one in the Guns N' Roses chapter, I think, where he just like puts a bunch of bullet points.
Yes, I have it right here. It's page 234, and this is what it says. It's the black box. Okay, so I guess that's like, I don't know, like you said, like his notes to the editor. And it says, in brackets, still to come. I don't know how to say this word. Vince Aharais Studio? Is that what it says? And then it says Motley tryout, and then JM fucks girl in 7-Eleven parking lot, end brackets. We didn't hear about none of this shit.
No,
this is not still to come. This does not happen in the book.
Yeah, I just love the idea that Sebastian Bach gave this manuscript to the publishers and they did not read it at all. They just sent it directly to the printer, so there's all kinds of notes. But you can understand why he did that because there's just so many stories. And I know that this seems weird because we were just complaining about how the Led Zeppelin book is like 120 Days of Sodom. It's just like a bunch of disconnected atrocities. But I don't know. I guess it's just Sebastian Bach is just a lovable scamp. Like I can't be mad at him. Like
it's the way that it's written. Like you can tell that he's enjoying himself when he writes it.
Exactly.
And also like Sebastian Bach is like smart enough to be witty. Like he knows what he's doing. He's writing an actual narrative. That doesn't mean it makes sense.
Right.
Like the timeline changes all the time. It's like sometimes you'll be reading about something in 1991 and then you're reading about something in 2007.
Right.
Like he tried to keep it linear but failed. But like at least like it's like fun to talk to Sebastian Bach, whereas like Richard Cole, not so much.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I was thinking back to like so many, all of the Led Zeppelin stories, they were just like whining about being bored. And it's like Sebastian Bach is many things, but he is never bored. Like he makes his own fun wherever he goes. So I mean, yeah, the Aerosmith tour, the main thing that I underlined here was that it says, this was like a note to self because it says, as Joe Perry himself mentions in his biography, Rocks, I was indeed enjoying our newfound success. And you know I love it when there's the Headbangers Book Club Extended Universe. So I feel like this means we need to read Joe Perry's book and see where Sebastian Bach shows up. So that's just like a note to self there. This is like the sex chapter. Like there's, you know, like I alluded to this last time. There were a couple of times where, you know, he was... like I took this girl home, but like we couldn't do anything because I just wasn't feeling it. And he gets over that by the time he goes on tour with Aerosmith because there's just all kinds of sex going on. He's tying girls up backstage. He's having like some kind of let me try and find it. Okay, here it is. One of my specialties. This is on page what page is this? Page 188. One of my specialties on tour was to find two of the most insanely hot girls you'd ever seen who also wanted to make out with each other. Or more. Band members would run off to the side of the stage, check out what was happening behind the scrim. A little private show, maybe a little motorboat action. I was really good at setting up this kind of scenario. Chicks dig singers. One time I had two girls on the stage behind Joey Kramer, the drummer for Aerosmith. They were making out. I was spanking their asses as they fondled each other's tits. Joey turned around and couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was laughing and completely lost his concentration on the show. Steven Tyler ran up to him and slammed his mic stand down on the stage in front of Joey's drum kit. Hey, motherfucker! Yo, Joey, what are you doing? As much as Steven Tyler loved beautiful women, the show came first. So I did enjoy it. Something about Joey Kramer is funny to me. I think because there was that recent... Aerosmith, I think, was it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction or something? There was some recent thing with Aerosmith or like the Grammys. I don't know, but there's a recent thing with Aerosmith where they weren't letting Joey Kramer play with them. And he like went on a PR offensive because he was being iced out of his band.
I don't know. It's so
Joey
funny.
Kramer, Joey Kramer's just funny
so
to me.
stupid.
Yeah.
Every time they're on,
it had
like
big like Peter Criss and Kiss energy. Like that's what I think was so funny about it. Like just the petty. You know, you'd think that these guys could just swallow their pride for one day and just play together at a fucking award show or whatever. It's like you should be lucky that anybody wants to see you, you know, but like it wouldn't be rock and roll if they didn't have these ridiculous childlike egos. So oh yeah, there's the part about Tom Hamilton telling them that they spit too much.
Yeah, I know. Imagine asking one of your heroes, like, "Do you have any tips?" And they're like, "You spit," and like no compliments or critiques on the stage presence or anything. Just
right. Yeah. Not enough scarves on your microphone stand. Like that's what Steven Tyler said.
That would have been Steven Tyler's. I think honestly,
talk about David Lee Roth.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The best part of the Aerosmith chapter isn't even
Aerosmith.
Like, fuck right. Aerosmith. David Lee Roth is in this chapter. Why the fuck are we talking about Aerosmith? I like the part where like David Lee Roth wants to meet him and someone tells him that and he's just like, of course I want to meet David Lee Roth.
Yeah, right. What other response is there? I see that I underlined this part. When he shows up, it's backstage at the Eat 'Em and Smile tour. He says, I was quite impressed that Dave had a blow-up swimming pool backstage filled with suntan oil for girls to wrestle in after the show. The room was all set up with stage lighting and a mammoth stereo to create the proper hot oil wrestle vibe. I was like, yeah, Club Dave, we're familiar.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a outsider's perspective of Club Dave. We've never had anyone describe this other than David Lee Roth. This is someone from the outside looking in on Club Dave.
Right, exactly. So, I love those. I love those intersections. And then you got to tell, I haven't gone back to this part of the audiobook, but I can imagine it because there's a lot of, so basically it is he's at the Rainbow with David Lee Roth and Axl Rose.
Yeah, and they're all at a table, and Bret Michaels comes up and asks if he can sit with them, and they're all mean girls to Bret Michaels, and they're like, no.
Yeah, that was a pretty great part.
They literally, David Lee Roth, Axl Rose, and Sebastian Bach just told Bret Michaels that he cannot sit with them. Like, literally, that's what happened.
Oh yeah, and this is also where Sebastian Bach keeps walking on the table and gets kicked out.
Yeah, which is why he gets kicked out of the Rainbow. And this is also where David Lee Roth gets really drunk and he like leans back and says, "There's some pretenders to my throne." This is what made me
doing it. Like, so I haven't heard the audiobook yet, but the way that David Lee Roth writes it, it sounds like he's basically
Sebastian
doing
Bach writes it.
Or I'm sorry, that Sebastian Bach writes it. This section was not guest written by David Lee Roth. But it sounds like he's basically talking in a Foghorn Leghorn voice.
Yes. I mean, that's it. He's like, this is why I got the audiobook, so I could hear what this sounded like. But he's just like, there are some pretenders to my throne, I said. and then like, so basically what happens with this is David Lee Roth keeps insinuating that
he just keeps saying pretenders to my throne. Yeah.
After inviting them out to the Rainbow, Axl Rose and Sebastian Bach, he gets drunk and then starts insulting them and saying that they're pretenders to his throne and basically like biting his style. Axl Rose predictably does not take this well. Right. And like he's just like, I'm not a pretender to anyone's fucking throne. I don't know. I don't look up to you or anyone. And then he like is gonna punch him. And like here, Sebastian Bach says something. Oh, let me see if I can find it. Because
it's a rare example of Sebastian Bach being the voice of reason. Like, usually he just escalates.
He usually escalates, but then there are times when he's like the straight man, and that's usually when he's with either Sebastian Bach, Axl Rose, or Vince Neil. Because
oh yeah, it says it felt as if Axl was about to fight Dave. Dave was a kung fu master. Axl was a street urchin.
Yeah, that was
it. I did not want to know who would win this battle.
Yep, that was
it. I honestly, Axl is really funny in this book.
Who do you think would win?
I mean, Axl probably, because I think Axl would fight dirty. Like,
oh yeah,
I feel like he would have kicked him in the nuts.
Yeah. I just it's like I would be happy with the outcome of either of them. I would love to see David Lee Roth get punched out. I would love to see Axl Rose get punched out.
Yeah, really, everybody wins. Yeah.
I like also how this is resolved, which is that David Lee Roth faxes them a handwritten note apologizing.
Right.
Can you imagine just like all of a sudden you just get a fax and it's David Lee Roth?
Yeah, that part is great. That's there's certain parts of this book that I'm actually going to go back and listen to because I'm like, I bet this plays so much better.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah.
I did listen to chapter 9 mostly on audio, and that one is again probably the best title. Bunch of Booze, Mountain of Blow, Quaaludes and Tennis, My Time with Metallica. Again, Lars Ulrich is the surprise scene stealer of this book. I like some Metallica music. I like Metallica a lot, but I would not call myself, I don't know the personalities of the different Metallica guys. The only thing I really know is that,
James Hetfield is homophobic and
and Lars Ulrich is and that there's evidence of that in this book too, because he goes to a gay club. or they go out to some kind of club where there's a lot of gay dudes there, and James Hetfield at the end is like screaming in somebody's face.
Yeah. Yep.
But I know that Lars Ulrich is, I always associate him with, he's the Napster guy, like he just seems kind of like a dick. But in this book, he's a dick, but he's like he's like a delightful prankster of a dick. Like I every time Lars shows up, that shit's gonna get real. And the best part, there's a couple of good parts. There's the time when he and Lars go to score blow and get a gun pointed at them. Is this very like Quentin Tarantino-esque scene, and then they go back and they do a bunch of coke, and Lars is like, I want to show you the speaker I bought for my car, and they find out that it was stolen.
Well, first of all, they drove up and they noticed that there were people running around the area.
Right.
And they noticed that the windows were down, but they were like, that's weird. Yeah, and then
Lars
went inside.
Just like, that's weird.
And Sebastian Bach is just like, I had a gun pointed at me. I think that's pretty weird.
Lars was unfazed by that.
Can it be both? Although I will say, I get it, because you don't necessarily think that's gonna happen, because I remember my car got broken into a couple years ago, and
it was like
the window
surreal.
was out, and I was just like, did I leave the window open? And then I got in the car and I'm like, I look over and there's a whole bunch of glass on my passenger seat, and I'm just like, it takes a second to register what's happening.
Right.
Like, what the fuck?
Right.
Is
And
this?
I imagine if you're on just like a ridiculous amount of cocaine, it takes even longer.
It's probably even more puzzling.
So they go out and they find out it's been stolen, and then they're kind of like, they handle that in a very like que sera kind of way. And then the next morning, Sebastian's grandma shows up, like after he's been up all night doing blow with Lars Ulrich. So that was a good story. My favorite story in this chapter, though, is my favorite Lars story specifically is when are they at the Rainbow again? They were at the Rainbow again, And there a lot of this book takes place at the Rainbow. This is presumably after Sebastian's ban was lifted. And he and Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses are hanging out, and they take Quaaludes and are completely incapacitated. And then Lars shows up and starts selling tickets to fans to take pictures of Duff and Sebastian, and they are trying to tell him no, but they're completely fucked up on Quaaludes, so they can't get the words out. So, and this is the part where he calls. Let me see. He calls. Yeah, he says, "As I look up, I see the laughing little heavy metal gnome known as Lars Ulrich dancing merrily around our table. He's like a little leprechaun doing a pixie dance." So that part was great. That part was especially great on the because you get to hear Sebastian not only do his increasingly deranged Lars voice, but also do himself and Duff on Quaaludes. So there's a lot of voice work going on. One of the things I like about this book is it's also educational because in this chapter. He's hanging out with the guys from Slayer at this metal show, and this guy comes up and is really drunk and obnoxious and trying to get a rise out of him because I guess he's in a band called Kid Wicked. So he wants Sebastian to be pissed off with him. Basically, he basically wants to get Sebastian to punch him so that he can get his name in the papers. And so Sebastian decides to punch him. Because he asked for it, and he tells us that he studied Shaolin Kung Fu because apparently every glam metal guy is also a martial artist.
I was trying to figure that out because in my notes I said this dude just casually drops that he has a Kung Fu regimen, but I couldn't remember what page it was on. At no point in this book does he mention that until just then.
Right, yeah. So he says that his Sifu, Damien, would tell him in training that the flat front part of your forearm is the hardest area of the human body to strike somebody else with. With no nerve endings, the forearm is also one of the hardest bones in your body. If you wind up and really want to fuck someone up, the forearm smash is the way to inflict serious damage without feeling any pain whatsoever yourself. Also very useful in close proximity. Perfect for this situation. So there you go. I learned something. If I want to fuck somebody up, to do a forearm smash and not throw a punch. So you can't say that this book
gritty details.
Yeah, too, exactly. And this is not the last time that Sebastian Bach does some kind of martial arts move on a person who asks for it. Also, the other one that springs to mind is I think in the next chapter. Izzy Stradlin's brother
he fucks
calls him an F-bomb, and he punches him, and Izzy is mad at first, and then he explained it, and Izzy was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like him." And
yeah, so this is my thoughts on this, and this is my general thoughts on violence in any situation, but I can totally condone punching someone in the fucking face for disrespecting you.
Right.
Because people are just out here acting like they're the main character and they can say anything, any kind of way. Now, I don't know, I feel like some of that was because Sebastian Bach was being called the F word.
Right.
And I don't think he was necessarily mad at Izzy Stradlin's brother for using a homophobic slur. It was more so that he was in his space and calling him the F-bomb. But that being said, I feel like people are emboldened and they need to be smacked in the fucking face for it.
Well, I was just thinking, imagine, and Izzy Stradlin, who the fuck is Izzy Stradlin's brother? Imagine if I showed up at one of your art shows and was just getting drunk and slinging slurs at people. I would not expect you to have my back if somebody punched me in the fucking face.
Well, another thing is that the Stradlin brothers are apparently mad punchable because both of them are just doing stuff that they need to get their shit rocked for. Izzy Stradlin fucking. I'm totally Team Vince Neil with the Izzy Stradlin thing because Izzy Stradlin, I mean, granted, this is Vince Neil's account of it, but he didn't he like karate kick a pregnant woman? Like,
right, yeah.
He needed to have his shit rocked. Izzy Stradlin's brother walking around here calling people homophobic slurs. You need to have your face punched in. Like, I'm team whoever is on the fist end of an Izzy Stradlin and his brother punch.
Yeah, exactly. This is also the chapter where he sets his pubes on fire and then forgets about it for like 18 years. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And then he like gives someone his like limited edition Skid Row jacket and then gets
asks
it back.
for it back. Yeah. I was like, come on, man. Like so anyway, I don't have anything else to say about that. I'm just saying
there's nothing
he set his pubes on fire
to say. Like my note, like that was one of those times that I took a note thinking that I would care about it later, and so it just says sets pubes on fire, page 229.
Yeah, and by the end of it, you're just like, so and what? Like, so yeah, the next chapter 10 is all about Guns N' Roses. There's some good stuff in here. Like I said, Axl is a surprisingly good character.
I think a lot of that is filtered through Sebastian Bach, though. I don't know that.
Yeah, he's probably actually not as fun to hang out with as he seems.
Lest we forget the anecdote where Axl Rose gets the cops called on him by his neighbors because he was playing Dread Zeppelin really loudly. Like, can you imagine living next to Axl Rose and having to hear Dread Zeppelin, and when you call the cops on him, the cops are just like, he just talks to the cops and they leave?
Right. Yeah. I just like their chemistry together. There's also a lot of Steven Adler, and I feel like Steven Adler in this book is sort of like the like a cautionary tale for like how bad things can get with because so far it's all pretty smooth sailing. Like he did Speed and it didn't work that well. He's also not great. Like, cocaine's not great for Sebastian Bach. I mean, cocaine's probably not great for anybody, but I think he's starting to learn his limitations chemically in this part of the book. But so far there haven't been any like serious issues with Sebastian that are specifically drug related. But then we have Steven Adler, and there's this part where he nods off in the middle of rolling a joint, watching The Love Boat in bed, and he nods off for like 6 hours and doesn't drop the joint, and then wakes up and is like confused for a second and then starts rolling the joint again, which is like hilarious and also horrifying in the way that heroin addiction often is. So that's something. And then by the end of this chapter, Steven Adler gets kicked out of the band because he's too fucked up. And imagine being too fucked up for Guns N' Roses like that. Like it's a real like drug casualty, So it's a pretty chilling thing. Oh, here's another list. This is a good list. Page 248. This one gets like the other one said still to come. This one is just like the notes. St. Louis, eating pussy with Matt. I'm assuming Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses. Chicks in Scandinavia. Too high to fuck in Germany. Stage diving in Germany. Asked to sing Nuremberg. Too tired to be in November Rain. The video, I guess. Slash's house nude boxing. How did that story not make the cut? Smoking coke, believe in me, Wembley, curses under door. No idea what that means. Ecstasy first time, too much, carried out a party too high. I mean, that's basically the story. That's like flash fiction. Iceland getting in fight, coming down from ecstasy, fighting on Jack, Pantera tour, Soundgarden. The world will never know about any of those stories.
Why is this even in here? At least like when you go to the index in the Led Zeppelin book and it says shitting and shoe incident, you're told what that is if you go to that page. This is just like
this would be like if the book just said shitting and shoe incident and then moved forward. So then we have this weird little interlude chapter. This is everybody is mad at me all of the time, and you already mentioned it's basically, it's like taking us through his schedule and why Sebastian Bach is impossible to live with. Basically,
it's a get ready with me YouTube video. Like.
Yeah, right. I did like. There's a good. He talks about running and going to different. And this is why we don't hate him like we hate Led Zeppelin, because it's like he goes to all of these, amazing countries and he like appreciates it. And he like sees the world and he goes for a run in Beijing and like is jogging through this neighborhood and all these old Chinese people are staring at him. I imagine
this is what the Haruki Murakami book about running is like, but condensed into one chapter.
Yeah, exactly.
I like this chapter especially because like I run sometimes. I haven't. Well, I don't. I guess now it's more like I ran in the past tense because I haven't run in a really long time. But like it's just kind of cool because I know like he's talking about how long it takes him to get ready and how long it takes him to stretch afterward, and I'm like, yeah, it's part of the reason I don't run anymore because it takes too fucking long. I don't have time anymore.
Yeah, but it's just kind of that's right. I don't relate to this at all, but I do enjoy the image of Sebastian Bach running into your neighborhood.
Yeah, I know, and I also like the part where it's just like he tells that story about how like he scared this woman's dog.
Right.
And nothing comes of it. He just like scared this woman's dog, and then he saw her, he like went back and saw her just in her car looking confused, and her dog was still gone. In my notes I just say, what is up with this dog story?
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere. He just scares some woman's dog and then just like keeps it the next chapter.
This is also the chapter where we find out that Chris Rock is apparently a Skid Row fan.
I know. I wrote that in my notes. Who would have ever guessed the weekend's events when I wrote this like a week ago?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because he's on Saturday Night Live, and I watched the Heavy Metal ABC's sketch. It's actually pretty funny. And Adam Sandler, I don't really like Adam Sandler, but Adam Sandler does a really good Axl Rose.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. So this is the point in the book where we start seeing, he starts telling us the last time he does whatever substance. So this is the last time he drinks Jack Daniels because he apparently just goes off the rails at this SNL after party. Although, like,
he doesn't really explain what happened because he doesn't remember it, so it just sounds like he went crazy.
I know. It seems like it's really one of the less notable. But I mean, maybe the fact that he blacked out is what's frightening to him.
But this is kind of like what, like, I know last time we talked about like his self-awareness and stuff, and I feel like the second half of book there's a definite dip in the self-awareness because what will happen is he'll be like, I don't drink whiskey anymore, it's bad, here's why, and then he tells this story. It's like, that sounds fun as shit. Right. And then, or like when he goes on this like long monologue about how cocaine is terrible for you and how stupid it is to do it, which like I agree. I haven't done cocaine and I don't want to.
Right.
But then the next story is about him having fun at Ace Frehley's house doing lines with Ace Frehley.
Cocaine, like the most cocaine he's ever done.
Yeah, and he's like, this was like a symbol of having made it, and I'm like, okay, but you did just a paragraph ago tell us that it's stupid and to not do it. Like, lest we forget. Seems like there's just like some mixed messaging in the order of which he's telling us these stories.
Right. Yeah, I think the most relevant before Ace, because I want to get to Ace Frehley, the most relevant of the pre-Ace Frehley cocaine stories.
Oh, also his Ace Frehley impression is probably my favorite one.
Yeah,
other than David Lee Roth. It's great.
I have to hear that because I can hear it in my head. Like I know what it sounds like. I just need to confirm it. But I love that when he decides to stop doing coke, it's because he runs into one of his old telemarketer friends from Detroit who were doing coke at the time. But now he's like a Satanist.
Yeah, what lot of this book, I didn't finish reading it, but I was listening to the audiobook while I was like in the back receiving books or whatever. So a lot of this I just heard like quietly while I was receiving books.
And it really does just kind of like wash over you. Yeah. It's but Ace Frehley, so I feel like one of the there's two major themes in this. The first is, you already kind of touched on it, Callie. Like his mantra in the first half of the book was, I was only X. Like, he's always like reminding us how young he was, you know, and all the wild things that are happening in his life. And this one, his mantra is, it was a different time. But the other theme, it was
a different time.
Yeah.
That's how he says it every time. Which is like, I guess it was a different time. Like, I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to make comparisons, obviously, because I was not alive in the 80s. But a lot of the stuff he says, like, it was a different time. I'm like, stuff that's comparable to that still happens.
Right.
Like, okay.
Yeah, it's not like we're living in a Rush album where like all rock and roll has been outlawed, or you know, like, or was that was Styx? Did Rush do an album? I think Rush did an album.
I think
every progressive rock group did an album
in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but the other major theme of the second half of this book is being disappointed by Kiss, which again, like, I relate.
Yeah, like, we get it.
And so he meets Ace Frehley. This is in the mid '90s. They do a bunch of coke, despite Sebastian just telling us that he hates coke and hates the way it feels. But I guess if you're gonna do coke again, similar to like him doing speed with Lemmy, what, are you not gonna do cocaine with Ace Frehley? Like, you know, Ace is a mess. Just as we would imagine, having read his book, he's in this like insane. He called it a crazy, fucked up, drug crazed man cave. With like a VHS player dangling from the TV. And the idea is that they're going to write a song together. Oh, this part was hilarious to me. So it says, this is page 280. The Ace was ready to rock. Sebastian, what do you want to do? With this, he played a sequence of 2 chords, which happened to sound a lot like the first chords of the Motley Crue song "Shout at the Devil." Richie and I, which Richie is this? Is this Richie? Richie. Oh, it's Ace's rhythm guitar player, Richie Scarlett. I don't know who the hell that is. So anyway, Richie and I looked at each other. What else do you got? He played the exact same sequence, only now the very last chord was different. It went 1 chord higher, which happened to be the exact second 2 chords of "Shout at the Devil," if I wasn't mistaken. Is that it? Ace goes, what would you sing over that? I wanted to say, "Shout at the Devil." So anyway, he writes this song with Ace, and we actually don't get payoff for this in a while, because, you know, they write this song very painstakingly, because I don't think, he doesn't come out and say it, but I don't think Ace is running at his full creative capacity at this point in time. So it's really like Sebastian's doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this songwriting, and the other musicians there, and they finally get a song out, get it done. It doesn't end up coming out on Ace's album, but then, so later, like I think a couple chapters later, Ace calls him and is like, "Hey man, it's coming out on Psycho Circus," which I was like, wait, there's a Sebastian co-write on Psycho Circus? It didn't actually, it didn't end up on the album, but it did end up on a later Ace Frehley solo album, but without Sebastian Bach getting any of the publishing. And he apparently didn't even like, according to the book, he didn't even say anything to Ace about it, but he was like, you know, hurt. He cries, but he was like, "This is my hero. I don't want to, you know, I'm not going to accuse my hero of plagiarism." So that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But it's not even the most fucked up thing a member of Kiss does. Well, no, that's not true. I have a soft spot for Ace. It is, I think, objectively the most fucked up thing a member of Kiss does in this book. But the thing that Paul Stanley does later is also pretty fucked up. So the thing Paul Stanley does is very petty. So like, you know,
mean, but we've read Paul Stanley's book. What else can you... Like, basically, both of these things are something that I would expect from both of them. Like, Ace, I don't even know that he, like, left the songwriting credit out on purpose. I think he just fucking forgot.
Yeah,
like,
he could have forgotten, or he could have been like, man, I really need to buy more drugs, so let me just get a bigger chunk of the publishing. Like,
either one is totally what I would expect Ace to do. And then Paul Stanley, I would 100%, like, of course he was petty about...
Yeah, he's a bitch. Like, he's... I enjoyed the poetic nature of him driving out to record with Ace in a horrible snowstorm and smashing his Jaguar up, which, like, if you know from Ace Frehley's book, Ace was like the king of totaling luxury cars. So it's like just coming within proximity of Ace Frehley will make you smash your Jaguar. Like,
I also like the back and forth where Sebastian is trying to be responsible and, like, not die, and he's like, I'm like really, because he's like really high and drunk at the time, he's like, can I just stay at the studio because it's really snowing and I don't feel comfortable driving? And Ace is like, what do you mean, they're gonna close the studio, come on. It basically, like, forces him to drive home in this snowstorm.
This is also where Skid Row breaks up. Much like Motley Crue, they end up recording like an alternative album, which I think is fascinating. I haven't actually listened to it. I actually haven't listened to Motley Crue's alternative album either. I'm sure that they suck. Like, I have no... You know, this is not what I want to hear from Skid Row or Motley Crue, but I am kind of morbidly curious about it, because this is just an interesting point of time where, like, these old guard bands don't know what to do, so they're like, I don't know, I guess we'll just make an album that sounds like Nine Inch Nails. Like, like who asked for that? But anyway. The Skid Row breakup, at least according to Sebastian Bach, like, again, I barely know the other members of Skid Row, so grain of salt, I guess. Like, there's two sides to every story. But at least according to Sebastian Bach, he got kicked out of the band because he wanted to open for Kiss on their reunion tour, and the other bandmates were too busy with their solo projects that nobody cares about. So that was funny.
I'm with Sebastian on this, because I did some very, very cursory research.
Some fact checking.
Other sources say that it was because he left a mean voicemail.
Right.
On whoever I don't know any of it. Was it Rachel Bolan? I don't fucking know. One of the other members of Skid Row's phones or voicemail about not doing the Kiss show. But my thing is, like, I guess they didn't want to open for Kiss because they thought they were too big. But it's like, open for Kiss in 1996. Like, it's
right. I feel like opening for Kiss on their reunion tour is not really like a step. And you know me, like, I will never pass up the opportunity to talk shit about Kiss, but I feel like that was like a massive tour.
Yeah.
I think that actually makes, especially because Skid Row is not at their peak. I think the interest in the Kiss tour.
It's 1996, and it's like, also, I feel like even if you think you're too big to open up for someone at that point in your career, it's like, I don't know, it's a way to make money and have fun at the very least, and it's like you're opening for Kiss. Like, it just seems like a weird move. Like,
right. And this is also like, I feel like the fact that if they were a big influence on you, sometimes you do it anyway. Like, I just saw the other day that Roxy Music is going back on tour. I don't know who's in Roxy Music now, because I don't think Brian Ferry's in the group anymore. Brian Eno's definitely not in the group. So I guess it's the other guys from Roxy Music are going on tour. But the point is that St. Vincent is opening for them, and I feel like St. Vincent is objectively too big a star to be opening for the remaining members of Motley Crue. But not Motley Crue.
That would be something
of Roxy Music. But the fact that it's Roxy Music and they're on, and it's their 50-year anniversary, and St. Vincent, owes
everything to Roxy Music, I'm sure she jumped at the chance to do this, you know, like, I don't know. So,
right, or even like, you know, we saw Megadeth open for Dio and Black Sabbath. Like,
right,
I'm sure Megadeth is bigger at the point that we saw them in like 2007 or whatever the fuck. Like, you know, Megadeth is probably doing a little bit better than Black Sabbath with Dio, but it's like...
Right. Man,
why wouldn't you open for Black Sabbath?
I know.
Dio?
I'm so glad we went to that show too, because we got to see Dio. It was just
like 3 years later, and Dio
left
passed.
this mortal plane. Yeah.
And he yelled at that guy who ran across the stage. What did he say? It was like...
Did he put the evil eye on him?
I don't remember. It was like someone ran across the stage and he like Dio heckled him for doing it. It was great.
But so anyway, Broadway. So Sebastian gets kicked out of Skid Row. And much like Paul Stanley, he goes the Broadway route. In fact,
except Sebastian Bach can actually fucking sing, so it makes more sense that Sebastian Bach would be on Broadway as opposed to Paul Stanley.
Yeah. In fact, he competes with Paul Stanley for the role of Jekyll and Hyde. I know that we're already like taking forever, and I apologize that this episode is going to go so long, but also not, because like if you're listening to this, you did it to yourself. I have such fond memories of the Jekyll and Hyde musical, because where were we? Were we in Chicago? We were at a hotel.
We were in a hotel. I think Dad, it was for some work trip that Dad had to do.
Chicago,
and I think,
would have been
honestly,
too.
Full disclosure, I think that was the same night that we watched Spy Kids 2 and like kept drinking like pop and eating candy, and it culminated in me throwing up.
That's why I was so...
But before that happened, the Jekyll and Hyde with
David Hasselhoff, who was apparently right after Sebastian Bach. That's what Bach says, that he was like the next in line.
Because that would have been in like 2001 or 2002 when we were watching that. So that would have been like not long after Sebastian Bach was on Broadway.
Yeah,
and they did like the same songs, because I remember that. What is the song called?
He talks. What is it? Confrontation.
Confrontation. Yeah, that's it. Where he does the. I watched Sebastian Bach's performance, and I remember David Hasselhoff's one, because it's the one where he has one side is the ponytail and one side isn't the ponytail, and then to be Mr. Hyde, he keeps like doing this, where he's like. Like really like doing this claw with his hand.
Did Sebastian Bach also have the one side in a ponytail?
No, that's just part of it.
That was my favorite part of the
watch Confrontation with Sebastian Bach. There's a whole bunch of Bach on Broadway on YouTube that I've been watching.
So yeah, there's not that much well, there's some good stories, because like...
Okay, are you forgetting the part where the director comes up to him and holds his testicles?
That was exactly the part that I was just going to do, because Sebastian doesn't know how to act. So he doesn't know. He keeps moving his hands, and he's not supposed to move his hands. And so the director... like the way that he comes up with to get Sebastian to stop moving his hands is he forces him to put his hands right by his balls.
On his balls. I think he just holds his balls. And he's like, every time you move your hands, just think about me. He's like yelling it too.
Yeah. No matter how hard I tried, I could not stop my hands from moving. I couldn't stop sweating. I delivered the lines as best I could while continuing to fidget, making Robin Phillips, the director, madder by the second. Sebastian, quit moving your fucking hands. He jumped out of his seat and ran up onto the stage. Give me your fucking hand, Robin, the elder statesman of British theater, yelled in front of the shocked cast. None more so than me. He took my hand and placed it directly in his crotch, in front of all present. I could not understand what was going on. Screaming at the top of his lungs in his English accent, he jammed my outstretched palm up in between his legs. Every fucking time you feel like moving your fucking hands, I want you to think of your fucking hand right fucking here. These are my fucking balls. This is my fucking asshole. Do you fucking hear me?
I also like that the night before his debut on Broadway, he somehow ends up with Kid Rock and Mark McGrath of Sugar Ray doing cocaine.
I underlined this because Mark McGrath is like giving him shit. He's like, "What the fuck? When did you give up?" And it says, he seemed to think I was not rock anymore since I was now doing a musical. I was like, excuse me, Mark McGrath thought that Sebastian Bach sold out?
Since when is Mark McGrath the arbiter of what's rock
like ever?
music?
When was Sugar Ray ever rock and roll? Mark McGrath, my favorite story about Mark McGrath is, and I think there's footage of this, I'll link it if I can find it, but he was coming out of a club at some point, like, latter day, like well after Sugar Ray's star had fallen, and some kid is like, "Hey, Sugar Gay," and he gets like really mad and like comes after the kid and is like yelling at him and threatening him, and it's like, calling him Sugar Gay is not that funny, but calling him Sugar Gay and then having him react like that is fucking hilarious. So if I ever see Mark McGrath, I'm absolutely calling him Sugar Gay.
It's like when that guy kept calling Jason Derulo Usher.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Stanley. Doesn't he go to see Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, so Paul Stanley was auditioning against him. He apparently was pissed that Sebastian got the role instead of him.
Well, because wasn't he promised it, and then they auditioned Sebastian, the guy was like, never mind.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if he was officially promised it, but it was like he pretty much had it in the bag, but then they were like, oh, wait, here's a rock star who can actually hit notes. Like, so yeah, he shows up and then he leaves during the intermission, which is, again, like you said, it's the most Paul Stanley thing he could possibly have done in that moment. Oh yeah, this part is like apropos of nothing. So he's leaving the play and gets in a limo, and this guy forces himself into the limo and says, "Sebastian, nice show. We're going to whack you." And then leaves. and what's really funny is that Sebastian reacts in the most Sebastian Bach way possible. It says, "I jumped out of the car and went after the guy." What? You want to whack me? What? You want to whack off my fucking dick? I'm like, and what I love is that he does this, fearing that this man is actually going to kill him, but at the same time can't help but confront him in the middle of the street about it. Like, I
don't know. I get it.
Yeah.
I get why you would be like, what? It's funny that he says whack you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get why that would be absolutely terrifying.
Right. And I guess, if you are going to get killed, right, if you are going to get killed by a mafia contract killer or whatever, then maybe it would be good for your last words to be making fun of him and saying, "What are you going to do? Whack my dick off?" And that's the last thing you say before you die.
It's also like, why is he saying, "We're going to whack you"? It's like, we're going to bonk you.
Yeah. And then 9/11 happens. This part, my favorite part of the 9/11 thing is
that it amounts to nothing.
It amounts to nothing. He pulls his kids out of school and doesn't know, and all of this is like fine. It's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. He lives in New Jersey, right across the bridge from New York, so he doesn't know what's going to happen. But then the part that I love is that he is convinced that they're under nuclear attack. So it says, "There were guys working on my roof that day when I returned back from school."
Scares them.
Yeah, and he's just, they're like, "What's going on?" And he tells them that they're under nuclear attack, which is not true. Yeah. So they like jump off the roof and run for their lives. And then he, I guess they're trying to drive to Canada. I was trying to work out the geography of this. Maybe it's just because of where his dad is in Canada, because I would have thought if you're in New York, you'd drive upstate and go across, like Niagara Falls. But he ends up in Pennsylvania, and he hears when Flight 93 goes down, he says he has a vivid memory of the news story being reported that the U.S. government shot down the plane. And then he said, you know, he's like, I only ever heard that repeated by conspiracy theorists. And then he was like, who knows what really happened that day?
Yeah, right.
And then I did like the chapter ends on a good punchline because he says, I told this story to D. Snyder once. He said, well, Sebastian, that's awesome. On 9/11, you took your car and drove it straight from the World Trade Center site right to the Flight 93 crash site. Way to go.
I also like that this is just casually drops that this is D. Snyder telling him this.
Right, I know.
Like, imagine if you could just tell your stupid anecdotes to D. Snyder.
I know. This is the only part of the story where D. Snyder shows up, I think.
Yeah,
this is the only story.
Yeah, and there's like a picture
He's
of
like
him.
mentioned offhand one other time, but...
There is a picture of him, which is
right,
inserted,
a picture which
for...
is definitely not from 2001, because they're both like way too ripped for it to be 2001. So then there's more Broadway. He does Rocky Horror. Wasn't a great experience.
He doesn't want to do it, and so he asked them for more money, and then they meet his offer and give it to him, and then he has to do it, and so he's riffraff. And I watched a video of him as riffraff, and it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's a lot. The whole
weird,
time
like,
he's like riffraff's whole thing. At least when Richard O'Brien plays him, is that he's very like has like a calm voice until he does like the crazy rock scream.
Right.
And that's like what's remarkable about that performance. And Sebastian Bach is just like Sebastian Bach as riffraff.
Right.
Like
yeah.
a lot of headbanging. He's like got the like metal voice the entire time he's singing.
I can hear him singing Time Warp, but I can't really see him playing the role. I think the most notable thing about Rocky Horror is at one point he just offhand lists the cast, and I was like, what? He says, working with Daphne Rubin Vega, Terrence Mann, Sally Jesse Raphael,
Oh, yeah.
Dick Cavett, Penn and Teller, and others in the Rocky Horror Show on Broadway showed more to me about stagecraft. I was like, did they just throw darts at a board and like pick the cast at random? We kind of touched on the whole Vince Neil thing. I guess the main thing I'll say is that Vince Neil used to call him and just bark like a dog.
Oh, yeah. I forget. It's like there's so much that you forget. Like,
Yeah. He gets really belligerent with a VH1. Or no, he gets really belligerent with Darius Rucker's wife.
oh, yeah.
Because they're going to a VH1 party and she's like handling the guest list and she won't let them in. And so Vince is like freaking out and he just like keeps screaming, fuck VH1. And then like eventually he's by himself and just muttering, fuck VH1 to himself.
Which is hilarious because if you go, like, I mentioned this in the Dirt podcast we did, it's like, VH1 was like the home of Motley Crue. Like they have the biggest like like video library of Motley Crue shit. Like they're the reason anyone's checking for Motley Crue.
Right. Oh, and then this had another good thing where he goes home from hanging out with Motley Crue and his wife. His wife thinks he was out drinking and fucking chicks, and he's like, yes, I was completely drunk the whole time, but I did not fuck any chicks. And then, you know, it escalates and they're fighting and he leaves. And then there's another note to self that says, continue this story, I end up in jail. Then he does Jesus Christ Superstar. He has a weird, petty rivalry with the guy who plays Judas.
He has a petty rivalry, but he also views him as a father figure.
As a father figure, yeah. And he also like dies of cancer right around the time his dad dies. So yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of different father figures toward the end.
It's literally anyone who's 57 and a man.
Yeah,
Sebastian Bach. If you are 57, Sebastian Bach will ask you, "Are you my daddy?" Because Ted Nugent is also a father figure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's a transition. I feel like we got to talk about Ted Nugent now. Because, like, he talks about Gilmore Girls, but basically the part about Gilmore Girls is I was in Gilmore Girls. So, yeah, Ted Nugent. I mean, I was expecting a little bit more from this part. just because like the fact that Ted Nugent and Sebastian Bach did a reality show, I'm like, there could be a whole fucking book about it. But apparently he and Ted Nugent did not get along, understandably.
Well, I also don't think that Sebastian Bach wanted to do the stupid fucking show.
Right,
like, that's what I get from it, which is
yeah,
like fair because it's a dumb show. Like,
yeah, it's like right after his dad died, he's drinking a lot. I think he probably just wants the money. You know, and so this is the part of his career where it's just like now he has to be humiliated, you know, to make money. And Ted Nugent, very unsurprisingly, is saying racist things.
Well, first he's saying, and this is like I feel like me and Sebastian Bach are on the same page about Ted Nugent because he's saying like love his music. Yeah, you know, like I don't really agree that Ted Nugent is funny because I've heard him talk and he just sounds like an insane person. Yeah. But like he's saying like, I thought he was funny. He's like, blah, blah, blah. He was a father figure to me because he's 57. I got along with him. But then one day when they're recording on set, Ted Nugent goes on one of his many rants where he starts telling people that he's black.
Yeah, he wrote about this in one of his books too. I don't know why he has this compulsive need to tell people that he's black and call himself the N-word. It's a bizarre.
Well, the first time I like knew of him saying that, there's a quote in Mojo. Right. In a Mojo magazine where he was saying that some black guitarist told him that he plays like an N-word, and I'm like, did that happen? Yeah. I don't think so, but okay. Maybe I'd be more inclined to believe it if Ted Nugent didn't constantly go on rants about how he's a black person. Right.
Right. It's very
Which is
weird.
So strange coming from someone who is very clearly racist that he's like so like hell bent on convincing people that he's black.
Right. It's very bizarre. And I feel like this is the first time that I've heard somebody actually say that, like, because he says, so that's what he said on camera. He self-identified as an N-word. But off camera, they were talking about like the Detroit riots and like, you know, just talking like in a way that I think is very familiar to us as people who grew up among racist whites in Michigan.
Yeah, who were from Detroit and left and went into the suburbs and still hold this like weird hostility towards like black people in Detroit because of the riots.
Right. So it feels weird. It feels weird to, let me put it this way. It's not surprising, but it is like, I feel like I've never really heard somebody say this exactly. It's because it's usually like, he shouldn't be saying the N-word anyway, but he's usually saying it in a quote unquote positive way, like self-identifying as that. I feel like I knew Ted Nugent was racist, mostly because if there's that much smoke with his politics, then there's got to be some fire, you know, like that's part of it. And then the reason why I knew Ted Nugent was racist was because of the way he talked about Obama, you know. But this was like the most clear cut I've ever seen of his like, oh no, he's just a classic, you know, like any other white guy from Jackson basically is going to be talking about black people this way. I'm sure fucking Kid Rock talks about black people this way too.
But anyway, so Sebastian Bach speaks out against this to the producers.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I know, I didn't expect that. Honestly, like when I read any book by a white rock star, I pretty much expect to not agree with how they feel about race or human sexuality.
Right.
For the most part, I'm on board with Sebastian Bach. Now, that's what I've read in here. It's like he talks about how like he does not tolerate any kind of racism. Right. So like that was cool, and the fact that he actually like stood up and he was like saying that he was like, I'm not gonna record this show with someone being racist and the crew is black. Like
right. And it also does make sense. It does make sense because he grew up in the Bahamas, so like it's not like he never knew black people. That doesn't explain everything though, because you can grow up around black people and still end up racist, you know. So it was a cool thing. It's always nice that you're like, oh, they actually, you know, didn't do something fucked up.
Yeah, and not only that he didn't do something fucked up, but that he actually like stood up for what he did what he was supposed to do, which it sounds like I'm patting him on the back for doing like what he's supposed to do, which I am.
But a lot of people don't even
only because look at the other books we've read. Like,
right,
this is the first book we read where someone wasn't going to Japan and like beating someone in the head with a Jack Daniels, but like you have to take what you can get.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, even like look at fucking like Terry Crews doesn't stand up, and he's black, you know. So like, anyway.
I mean, like in David Lee Roth's book, he wrote that like ridiculous movie about how he's one of the like for some reason David Lee Roth is the only white person with rhythm and. Like I know I might be patting people on the back for something that they should be doing, but like consider the other book for a lot of things that we talk about, like even with like accountability and how we were saying Sebastian Bach is self-aware. I read a review that said like this book is super not self-aware, and I'm like, okay, but did you just read Stairway to Heaven?
Right, like, right, exactly. You got to put it on a scale. You got to grade on a curve. I feel like I mean, you know, at this point, it's just like we just catch up to current days. He divorces his first wife, who barely figured in the book. So I was kind of like, oh, okay.
The main point that she figured in the book was when he chose not to have sex with Christina Applegate because he had a baby mama and a child at home.
Yeah, exactly. And he kind of like, you know, he goes through like some wilderness years after he gets divorced, like literally couch surfing because his house also gets destroyed in the hurricane, in Hurricane Irene. So like that is a significant point, but I don't really have anything to say about it necessarily. One thing I will say is, Axl Rose totally ices out Bon Jovi, so that part was kind of funny. I guess they run into Bon Jovi, and Sebastian is like, "Hey man, you know, great job with your like." He had that country crossover hit. Congratulations. And Bon Jovi's like, "Yeah, thanks." And then he looks at Axl, and Axl just says nothing. And then the next day, Sebastian says something. He was like, hey, sarcastically, he's like, hey, I appreciate you congratulating Bon Jovi. And he was like, I didn't congratulate Bon Jovi. I don't give a shit. And that kind of, I feel like we've talked about most. Is there anything else that you can think of? He writes a poem about Ace Frehley. So if you're a fan of Sebastian Bach's poetry,
yeah, there are two.
His two heroes, the Hulk and Ace Frehley.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much after that. He basically just talks about how much he loves his new wife and his new family. I did enjoy that his daughter's name is Sebastiana Bach.
Yeah.
Because like he says it, he just like casually says like my daughter Sebastiana, and I paused the audiobook and I texted you. I was like, hold up. His daughter is named Sebastiana?
Yeah, I mean, it seems, I didn't look it up if they're still together, not to be like, cynical.
No, I think they are, because I've been looking at their Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
I watch Sebastian Bach's Instagram all the time, and he's always at shows. He also posts these like weird, they're like,
he's kind of on
videos.
Like an off-brand cameo, right? Like,
he's got the off-brand cameo thing, but then he also will just like post a picture of him shirtless, like I guess like as like a weight loss thing, like to show like his progress, maybe. Right. I don't know, but like it'll just be like a picture, but then like the picture will move, but it's not a video. So he posts a lot of those, and he posts a lot of stuff of him at shows with his wife.
Oh my God. How could I forget about this? Possibly the wildest story in the book is when he's at the Motley Crue show, I think, and he gets punched by the Hell's Angel. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then he breaks his nose, and he has to get his nose surgically reconstructed, but the anesthetics don't knock him out, and he goes into a psychotic like rage.
Oh yeah.
With his nose, like his nose has been removed, so he's like throwing nurses against the wall and like gets up and is like leaving the room and comes out noseless. It's the craziest shit I've ever read. I can't believe I almost forgot to mention it.
Well, you know why that is, though? It's because he tells the story and he's just like, rock it up. Like, he does that and he, like, can you imagine if I went into that waiting room and people saw, like, it would be like Frankenstein without a nose or whatever. Yeah. It's like, he goes back to the nurse and they're, like, looking at him weird and they're like, oh, he doesn't remember anything, does he? And then they tell him this and he does not remember any of it.
Yeah, they were like, there was an incident when we tried to...
He was hypothesizing that it's probably because he did so much coke that, like, anesthesia doesn't really affect him.
Yeah, that shit was wild. That was that might be the craziest thing I've read in any of these books.
Especially since he's so tall. It's just
right,
like...
exactly.
It would actually be terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt bad for that nurse. I'm sure he did too, because it's not like he, it's not even like this is something that was demonstrably not Sebastian Bach's fault. Although I guess, like, technically, I guess you could maybe say it was his fault for getting punched by the Hell's Angel. But I mean, he elbowed the guy by accident, so it was. He was
just getting into Motley Crue.
Right, exactly. I can't really blame Sebastian Bach for this.
Well, and then the thing with the Hells Angels too is that he accidentally elbows him, and then they get in a fight. He gets punched, right? And then after he gets punched, they just like end up friends and like hanging out, and then he goes backstage at the Motley Crue show, and Maite is there.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was also because that was during that brief surreal period where Prince's ex-wife Maite was dating Tommy Lee.
Why did the Motley Crue men get so many of like Prince's?
I don't know. Yeah, it's like they're just swimming in Prince's wake. Was Tommy Lee like, I gotta compete with Nikki? Okay, Nikki got with Vandy. Which of Prince's exes can I get with? Yeah, very bizarre. That's an episode that I want to know more about. I feel like Maite wrote a book, but I feel like it's not quite trashy enough for our usual purview. But yeah, I think that's all. Now that I got that out, like that story is fucking wild. I don't think anything can top that. This was a nice palate cleanser after the horrible slog that those two Led Zeppelin books were.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading this, and the only reason I did not finish reading it, like I finished the book, but the only reason I didn't finish reading it is because I got the audiobook, so then I could just finish with the audiobook.
Right.
Which made it easier for me because I didn't have to sit down and read it. I could like listen to it while I was at work or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in a weird way, like I am interested in, now that I've invested so many hours of my life, I think I will go back and like revisit the Skid Row albums and listen to the music because I've been reading about it. But I think it's a testament to the book that I basically just know 18 in Life and I Remember You. I like I said before, I'm not a Skid Row fan, but I was still fully captivated by this book from beginning to end. It's you don't need to be necessarily a fan of the music. I just enjoyed Sebastian Bach as a person, and the cast of characters is so colorful that like if you have any kind of interest in this genre of literature, then you're gonna find something to like here. Yeah, do you have any like final thoughts?
Rock it up.
Yeah. What else can we say?
Mother truckers.
Mother truckers. So next month, like we said last time, we'll be reading Meatloaf's autobiography. It's called To Hell and Back. This is another one that will divide neatly into two parts. There are 4 basically chapters or parts of the book with a bunch of mini chapters inside. We will be reading the first 2 by the middle of April. Part 1 is called Bad Out of Texas. Part 2 is called Shakespeare, Grand Funk Railroad, Eddie the Brain Dead Zombie, and General Ulysses S. Grant. And yeah, so that's just a little
like the Bad Out of like a Bad Out of Hell
would make sense.
But Bad Out of Texas, like, is Meatloaf the titular bat? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, so we'll be reading the first half of it. Like I said last time, this is probably going to be a hard one to get your hands on. I'm sure there are used copies around. Maybe check your libraries, but we had to pay tribute to Meatloaf and also Jim Steinman, who passed not much earlier than Meat did. So that's what we're doing in April. Next episode we will tell you what we're doing in May, but I think everybody's got enough of it on their hands right now. So yeah, as always, read along with us if you can, or even if you can't get a copy of the book, ask us some questions and we'll address them. You can find us all kinds of places. Well, not that many places. You can find us on Twitter. We're called we're Headbangers BC on Twitter. We also have our like umbrella brand, if you will, is Dystopian Dance Party. That is on Twitter at Dystopian Tweets. On Instagram, we are Headbangers BC again, and also Dystopian Graham. And we don't have a Facebook anymore because fuck Mark Zuckerberg. Although, I mean, he also owns Instagram, but like, you know, we do what we can. Subscribe to our podcast. I forgot to mention this last time. We're on almost everything. All of the services that matter, you know, your Apple, your Google. I took us off Spotify because they said no to my demand that they give us $10 million for an exclusive contract, and so I know my own worth, and so I took us off. But nobody was listening to our podcast on Spotify anyway. You can keep listening on YouTube if you want, but like, I don't know why.
Yeah. So you want to grow as a person?
But you know, you can also, you know where to find us on YouTube. We're Dystopian Dance Party on YouTube, and we're also on dystopiandanceparty.com. And if you really want to, you know, go wild, you can email us at headbangers@dystopiandanceparty.com. Send us a comment, a question, a thought about either Sebastian Bach or Meatloaf, and if I like it, we will send you a sticker to put on a book of your choice. It could be your copy of Sebastian Bach's book. It could be your copy of Meatloaf's book. It could be any of the books. It could be a book that doesn't belong to you. Just don't tell anyone that we told you to do that. So, yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon.
Yay.